Hi all, I have a really amazing game to show you, World Chess Championship Game 10. It has enormous complications and interest to it. It's right up my street as an attacking player. And I even used to play the Sicilian Sveshnikov with black, so I relish sometimes these types of complications. So we repeat Game 8 up until a certain point. So the Sicilian Sveshnikov, and Fabiano unleashes on move 12 a novelty move b4. This has rarely been seen before. A couple of examples you might want to see in the pinned comment. There's a game going way back to Murray Chandler playing black in this exact position after king h1. Murray Chandler played f5, got an attacking position and won that. That was against Gambit in 23, who was 23-10. That was back in 1978. The high level stem game appears to be Jobova against Salgado Lopez in 2017. That's worth checking out as well. Some interesting, entertaining games around here for the stem games. But b4, bit of a novelty move. White is playing where his pawn majority is. So this pawn majority on the queen side, 4 to 3. So maybe later c4, c5 is supported. We have a6 kicking back the knight, and now Magnus targets that pawn immediately with a5. It seems playable as b6 as well. This doesn't seem as though black should be fearing anything in this kind of scenario. It should be an even position. So a5, yeah, pretty direct stuff, attacking that pawn. That's taken. If b5, that gives up the c5 square. Black should be cozy enough in this position, locking down c5. No pawn break for white there. Nothing much to do for white on the queen side after that if it's locked down. So better to keep the queen side open to try and create some carnage there instead. So taking, and then now knight c4, rook a8, bishop e3, eyeing that sensitive b6 square clearly, and white can carry on with a5 and make use of that b6 square. So this is what happens, a5, f4, bishop b6. Now black has to be careful not to take on b6 here. Magnus played queen e8. On taking on b6, I think it leads to basically a strategically bad position, because after bishop g4, exchanging off the light square bishops brings a kind of very low counterplay situation for black. And it's just very uncomfortable without the light square bishop. White's got a great lock on the light squares. Extremely uncomfortable scenarios would emerge. So it's best not to do that. And there's no real way out here. If, for example, yeah, bishop f5 just gives white the option, and it can even do that at leisure to take off the light square bishop. There's no point doing this. This is very comfortable for white. So queen e8, rook a3, where the rook can sort of influence the third rank, sometimes help against black's imminent attacking schemes. You might also have been tempted with immediate bishop c7. What's got to be balanced by both sides is the attack and defense potential of both sides. d6 might seem like a vulnerability, but black is also brewing up trouble with things like queen g6 and this, for example, with direct attack. So if white played bishop c7 instead of rook a3, then this scenario, white has to be careful with rook e1. Very careful, very, very careful. This actually sets up a trap for black. If e4, bishop h5, and that's uncomfortable for black. If queen g5, white just snaps off there with a big advantage. And if queen h6, then bishop f3, and there's no attack anymore. White's locked down the light squares. A strategically favourable outcome to head for, where there's not much counterplay for black. And d6 is still a target, and white even might get an attack, even more pressure on d6 later to make that more uncomfortable, for example, or maybe like this. So that's to be not to be desired. So rook a3 is played, though. Bishop c7, yes, does seem viable, but rook a3 for the moment. Queen g6. Now bishop c7 here. e4 is played. So very, very interesting. Big threat of f3. It's technically possible to consider what Magnus is about to play soon, which is this pawn sack. But I think Magnus is optimizing this. He doesn't play it here, so why doesn't he play it here, this b5? Well, what does it do, in fact? Well, the pawn sack, okay, it gives white a pawn on b6, but it drags the knight away from e5. And this can be really good for black, this kind of stuff. So let's have a look. e4. This position, unfortunately here, this is a really nasty forcing move, bishop h5. Otherwise, black does seem to be getting compensation. But with this nasty forcing move, the queen comes in to try and get the queens off. And then it's even looking at d7 here. So it leads to kind of horrible things happening, like b7. And white ends up, yeah, with a big advantage potentially. Queen b5 is also nasty, kind of challenging the queen again, with that knight on a3 actually being useful here, believe it or not. So it doesn't seem quite right to consider b5 here. So Magnus plays e4. The king steps out of trouble with king h1. Now b5 is played, so similar ideas, but it's been a bit more optimized. Now it's totally avoided here with knight b6, the whole pawn sack concept. But just for fun, let's have a look at some of the crazy variations. So the knight is dragged away from the sensitive e5 square. f3, g takes, knight e5. And you have to look at the pinned comment for the massive variations here. Let me try and run through with you some of the key ones. Okay. So let's say, instead of knight e5, first of all, let's look at that. E takes, knight e5. Here, this. Knight b5. Knight g4. Black would end up getting a big advantage in this line. That seems horrible, but white could have improvements for sure. So on e takes, if we look at this again here, instead of knight b5, white could play queen e2, and apparently this is stable after knight g4. It looks really scary though. So queen e3, trying to get the queens off again. f4, very technical stuff, but apparently white can hold this, believe it or not. So that's a very fascinating variation after e takes f3. So strongest appears to be knight e5, in fact. So if you promote knight e5 to the driving seat for seeing theoretically if black's winning this, rook g1, let's just say rook g1 for the moment. If b7, then this, yeah, is nice for black. And b7, let's see what is actually any perk of doing this. f4, sorry, f4 here. Knight f3, black has a big advantage. So rook g1, queen h6. So this is crucial, looking at h2 and looking at things like bishop g5 to f4 to gang up on h2. Let's say queen c1 with some urgency to get the queens off. Queen h5, queen e3, knight takes, and black is threatening checkmate. This is hairy stuff. Rook g2. It seems black, with huge precision here, actually is winning this with bishop h3. So the rook moves, and now bishop g4 threatening, renewing the threat of checkmate. Bishop takes f3. This leads to an advantage for black after the smoke clears. Yeah, because this is actually threatening checkmate. So black would be the exchange up there. But let's have a look. Let's just rewind here. There's a maze of variations here to check out. Instead of bishop takes f3, let's have a look at rook g2. Please follow through with the pinned comment. Please get it out on a new window to follow this. This is like the most hairy stuff of the World Championship so far to check out. Bishop g5 forcing move, offering the e4 pawn. Rook e8 supported by the queen on h5. You definitely need a computer to navigate your way through this stuff. Queen takes g4. It's not the end of the story. Rook takes e2, and with the queen hanging, so queen takes this check and then mate. So with the queen hanging, I know, this is getting crazy. And what if check? And this gets even crazier. And I've actually seen some totally ridiculous analysis from this position, which is just clearly not the way to go. This is a razor sharp position. Black here doesn't want to play king f7. It's perpetual check, but it doesn't ruin the win, because here black has the crushing resource, bishop d8, trying to put the queen on a dark square, so there isn't a multitude of checks after. So after queen takes d8, check. Now rook e8. There's no more checks. So black is threatening rook e1 with like mating. White would have to give up the queen, and it's fairly clear cut that black is winning this with a big advantage. So this is, but without bishop d8, it's just it's ridiculous. Yeah, bishop d8 is a key resource here. So some very, very interesting stuff. Okay, let's go back here. So king f7, we said this bishop d8 in this position. If bishop takes d8, just to show rook e1 check, and then mating, or rook takes g1 mating. So very, very hairy stuff there. After knight takes f3, yeah, rook g2, black is technically winning with bishop h3. So that's a crucial variation to understand here, the impact of black's attack potential. Let's also navigate back. So why, if not queen c1 as an alternative, to mark this out a bit more, knight c4 as an example, which is shows less urgency about what black is brewing up. E takes, knight takes, f takes here. This black has a big advantage there. If we look at this again with e takes here, if bishop d3, then knight takes, then rook f4, and we see black coordinating well. You know, it's coming in with rook h4 here. If white tries to distract things, again, black's getting a big advantage. So there's enormous complications, basically, of this pawn sacrifice. Yeah, if we look at this pawn sacrifice, enormous complications. Instead of, so we've had a look at knight e5, and we've had a look at e takes. Yeah, it's just the massive variations to check out. All right, so it was just totally ignored with knight b6, bypassing a lot of the stuff. So knight b6, trying to keep things more simple, not let black's attack run riot over white's king. We have knight takes b6, bishop takes b6. Yeah, you have to play bishop takes, otherwise you're losing the rook. So bishop takes b6. We have queen g5 now, and yeah, so very interesting move, queen g5. b4 is also interesting to consider. So computers around the world are indicating this is like even more accurate. So like rook b3, bishop f6, with some crazy ideas. If rook takes bishop c3, very technical ideas, why this is important. Because here, bishop d7, rook a3, bishop e5, and we get this kind of position where actually after bishop d4 it should be stable enough for white. White doesn't get hacked. But if white's not very careful with bishop d4 and plays queen d3, then white does kind of tend to get hacked. For example, like this, rook h6, and it's slaughter time. So white has to be very, very careful about black's attacking potential. But bishop d4 seems to keep things stable on current analysis of this position. So this is in line with b4, very, very dangerous b4. Let's look at this again. So rook b3, bishop f6, rook takes. Bishop e5 immediately apparently is slightly technically inferior to bishop c3, because after rook g1, f3, g takes hits the queen, queen h6. There's rook g3. This is just crazy. Yeah, bishop a6. Computers excel at these types of tactical positions, but it should be an even position apparently here. So let's look at that again. There's also, let me just show you something really weird here on bishop c3. You might think for a moment, rook b3, bishop takes a5. Is rook a3 any good with that pin? Black here has bishop h3 threatening checkmate, and it doesn't matter how white takes, black ends up either winning or with a small advantage. So there's some nice variations there which seem to demonstrate that maybe queen g5, you know, funny enough, Magnus being a human being, doesn't find b4. Okay, but it's kind of excusable, yeah. So b4 might be a really good try. So there's all sorts of weird stuff going on with the bishop on this diagonal, and with a5 and with h3 and with f3. It's a very hair-raising situation. So queen g5 keeps an eye actually on d5. So in case the queen ever leaves d5, that pawn could be taken. Okay, we have g3 here, and apparently this is maybe a small inaccuracy. Maybe white should have braved it with bishop takes b5. Fabiano, I believe, took ages on this move, more than 60 minutes apparently, to play what he did play. So he played actually g3. Let's have a look at bishop takes b5. Pawn grabbing. Is it punished here? It turns out, okay, let's just see. f3 threatens mate. G takes, E takes, rook takes f3, bishop g4, rook takes, bishop takes, f3, white has an edge there. So yes, white isn't getting mated in that particular variation, which is good news. But let's have a look at this again then. Bishop takes b5. If rook f6 is a try, rook e1, rook g6, bishop f1 seems to secure things down. f3, g3, rook h6. White can actually, it seems, take on e4 here with an advantage. Let's have a look again. On bishop f5, a6, rook h6, a7, e3, f3, rook, queen g3. This is a way for white to get absolutely smashed to smithereens, or is it? Look at this chaos. Yes, this is the kind of scary stuff where black has this pawn wedge, but white can actually resourcefully sacrifice a whole bishop just in time to stop getting mated on g1. Yeah, you don't really want this kind of hair-raising stuff, but there is queen g1 checkmate nevertheless. Yeah. So no, this is not good. So bishop f5, a6. After f3, yeah, this looks as though here, if f3 is played in this position, then this is winning. So white in this position actually has to uncork a rook sack. Yeah, we're in computer territory basically, where this rook sack leads to actually that pawn asset being celebrated with rook b1. All of these pieces over here, and after f3, yeah, rook b8, white ends up having a big advantage. Now, I think you'd have to have something wrong with you to want to grab this pawn actually, unless you really believe in your calculation abilities. There has to be something wrong with you to go in for all of this, to try and tempt all of this coordination of black pieces on h2 and with a pawn wedge on e3. And so you can, if you can really sacrifice a rook there quite coolly like a cucumber, then fine, you might want to do it for a laugh. But other than that, yeah, g3 seems a lot more safe in principle. Try and work out if this doesn't get mated, at least. Now we have b4. being played. On f3, white can actually take on b5 here, it seems, with rook e1 coming, and then here white has a small edge. So actually b4, we have rook b3. There's been some talk about the forcing move g takes, try and use this g file. This position, actually, white might actually be okay, believe it or not, technically, after parrying the mate threat, but it is scary. There's also, there's all sorts of things one can analyse till the cows come home, this position. So anyway, we have a move being played, rook b3, bishop h3, rook g1, f3, we've got the form pawn. Okay, bishop f1, bishop takes. Now queen takes, very important to let go of d5 here. Otherwise the form pawn will help sort of checkmate. For example here, queen g4 has the idea queen h3 to mate on g2. For example here, rook f5, there's other ideas brewing up as well. So for example a6, let's see a slaughter line, queen h3, queen takes h2 check is a neat tactic to be aware of with the form pawn. If rook g1, then rook h5, bishop g5 is actually a nifty move, because black wants to play rook h6 and queen h5 to gang up on h2 here. Now with rook h6 immediately, the problem is bishop e3, and if g5 there's bishop f4, and this is just madness. I know this is total madness. If takes, we win the queen. And if black tries now queen h5, then there's g4 just in time, protecting h2. As what I was saying, you need computers to be able to attack or defend here with the greatest accuracy. It's just beyond human tactics, all of this stuff. But apparently with the form pawn, and I have got an interest in form pawns, it seems in this whole line that black, though, has this very careful looking bishop g5 against this bishop e3 resource, and it makes it all work here after rook h6. It all works for black. This attack is just crashing through. There's no bishop e3 interruption. That's like checkmate there. If we look at this again, so bishop g5 being inserted just makes it all work. There's nothing really for white to do. This rook h6 and queen h5 is nasty. Just check this out once more. Bishop g5, a6. Right, we've seen enough of that there. So anyway, let's go back. So we've got this form pawn, and basically, to cut a long story short, and to cut out the d5 pawn as well, queen takes f1, queen takes d5 is played, letting go of d5. It's the best practical decision. It's just too much for black, basically, with this ganging up on h2 with things like bishop g5 as well, to cover any nifty defensive resources which were totally unreal. So anyway, rook takes b4 here. White actually takes out b4 in any case to try and restore pawn balance. So 5 pawns each. Queen e6. If e3, try and maybe to blast open this diagonal, or win a5 sometimes. Let's say this here, this should be an even position. So e3 seems plausible there. Queen f5, on the other hand, there's rook b5 here, nasty tempo, and this could actually be maybe in white's favour, a small edge for white here. So Magnus actually puts the queen on e6 where it isn't the subject of tempo gain. We have rook b5 without the tempo gain. Bishop d8, queen e1, bishop takes. Here, if instead of bishop takes, we look at rook c8 for a moment. Bishop d4, bishop f6. This should be an even position. Or here, queen takes f6. White would have a big advantage taking out e4, so it's important black plays rook takes f6 there. So rook c8 seems plausible as well. So anyway, bishop takes b6 commits to giving white a pawn on b6, but that's blockaded in its tracks soon. Queen c4, but not before a vicious resource is presented to white with both players less than 5 minutes now. Magnus plays queen e2. Yes, this has a lot of venom to it, queen e2, to do with the pawn mobility and other stuff. He could have played queen e6 with apparently an even possession. For example, like this. It's not possible for white to even take on d5 because of e3 crashing through. So white has to be really careful not to take on d5. And if white can't take on d5 and has to play something like this, then this maintains the balance. For example, here black would have a small advantage, so white has to be really careful. Say c4 there instead, and black has a big advantage again, threatening queen g2 there, and if rook g1, there's queen takes h2. So this has to be borne in mind as well. The form pawn tactics has to be borne in mind there as well. So yeah, white has to be super careful here, and this isn't so great. So queen e6 does seem as though it was playable with at least an even position, but queen e2 introduces quite a few tricky traps, and Magnus likes his tricks. And let's have a look. Rook e1, very safe again move, bypassing a lot of the complications. If the queen is permitted to be on e2 here, and we're going to have a look at this for fun now. Basically the queen's looking at the rook, so no c4 would just take the rook, clearly. If queen d4, leaving the queen there, this is carnage after e3 for white in various ways. Even though the queen looks as though it could be trapped here, there's spectacular counter resources here. Just rule out f takes for a moment. Queen g2 checkmate. Queen takes, let's rule out this. Queen takes d1. So let's now look at check and rook c1. Queen takes f2. Queen d4, black has a big advantage. Let's have a look at, after queen d4, which protects this guy, and trying to also trap the queen now. So let's run with c4. Black has e takes f2. After rook takes, there's f takes, and the pawns are crashing through. Yeah, funny enough. So that's nasty. On queen takes e3, there's queen takes d1. Now let's look at queen b3 check with the same idea of trying to trap the queen, because the queen is actually supporting d1 from here as well as this rook. So let's look at c4. So this appears to be trapping the queen. This is really amazing stuff. Also indirectly protecting the pawn. The queen's protecting both rooks. But in this position, black's play has a really nice move. Can you see what black does? Rook takes b6. And it seems black's winning here. If rook takes, f takes. So the queen, if the queen is left to be taken, that's a rook down. So if we have queen a4 to protect the rook, here rook a6 trying to drag the queen away from d1. Now taking, this is actually winning for black after sorting out the back row mate threat. Black has a big advantage there. Yeah, and this pawn is dangerous. You can't take the pawn without getting back row mated yourself. So very, very interesting stuff here with regard to the queen on e2. Yeah, it's fascinating. Here, so let's have a look at this again. So c4, rook takes b6, rook takes, f takes. Amazing. It's simply amazing stuff set with queen e2. So yeah, that's really a very good try to win the game, this queen e2. If white played a seemingly safe move, or the check even, it's all leading to the disaster. Maybe more understandable is the variations of e3, because yeah, the pawns have a lust to expand here. But with the check line and c4, that's a really vicious trap set by Magnus Carlsen here behind the scenes. So we have rook e1, yeah, just bypassing everything. That's why we're getting all these draws, because Fabiano is really super strong. He can see through a lot of this stuff, even with like short on time. So he could be a fearsome opponent if it does go to rapid or even blitz. So rook e1. Oh, did we mention just simply taking as well? Yeah, I hope we mentioned this. Maybe not. This is just nice for black. In any case, black ends up with a small edge there as well. Okay, not as spectacular as the other stuff. Okay, so rook e1 seems to be a really fine move. And so we go into this rook and double rook ending, 2 rooks each. So rook c8, rook a3, king f7, king h2, king e6, g4. So the king wants to go to g3 as well. So up to king. If the king steps to e5, then king g3 to stop king f4. For the moment, that pawn's protected. Now this idea of king f4 could be nasty, trying to herd these pawns forward. That's stopped. We have h6, h5, king d4. There are other ways to play this which seem a little bit less scary, at least from a technical perspective. For example, g5 should be an even position, or g6 with the same effect. Or king d6, for example, is okay. There's a perpetual check to keep the king out of doing anything nasty. And I think it's too dangerous to play king e3 here, because then things like king e3, maybe just rook b7 anyway. So let's have a look at Magnus's move. King d4. Why is it a bit shaky? Well, rook b5 is a strong reply targeting d5. We have rook d6, which is very important to play accurately now. It's, well, more important to play accurately now. On g6, check, h takes this. It looks as though white should have something here. White has technically a big advantage. E3, again, check repels that king back. As Magnus said he repels women in an earlier interview. So anyway, this position seems as though it should be an even position. So rook, okay, so maybe e3 is okay, but rook d6, check, rook ab4, and actually after c4, d takes, even though technically white's better with an extra pawn, it's just a theoretically drawn position now. They've managed to come to a theoretically drawn position after all that. Yes. So, yes. Yet another boring draw. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. No, the outcome is a draw, but getting there, there's just a ton of quite exciting, thrilling variations behind the scenes. It seems a lot of the fun stuff, of course, was bypassed by Fabiano when he didn't accept Magnus's magnificent pawn sacrifice. Otherwise, there might have been some big fire on the board on the king side. Shirov would be proud. But in the event, it seems at most critical points, Fabiano kept things stable, solid, more positional in nature, and more under control. So In fact, you know, the Queen E2 especially went like less than 5 minutes, and he still plays very calm Rook E1, bypassing all the traps. It's incredible stuff from both sides. So really great credit to both players, pushing the limits, I think, of human like tactical chess and controlling counterplay here, balancing things up. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this great game and the analysis of this game. If you did, please click the top left box, which should appear shortly, to become a member at chessbowl.net and play other YouTubers. Crucially, you can check the evolving analysis of this game over the next few days, weeks and months. So there'll be evolving analysis, which I'll try and promote like the key variations, make them highlight the promote lines, which are the greatest importance. So check that out on the Improve menu, Learn from the Masters. This is going to be a big one to analyse. We haven't got the final words here, only the start of analysis of what could have been behind the scenes here. So comments, questions, donations, see the description box. Like, shares, subscribe with the notification bell, all really appreciated. Thanks very much.